Hello and welcome to our second last flipped classroom lesson. Today we're going to be looking at the evolution of television shows in Australia. So we're going to be looking at how our viewing habits have changed over time and what has influenced them. So we're going to start with the arrival of television in the 50s. So the technology of television actually came to Australia in the 50s. So within 4 years of it coming to Australia in 1956, more than half the homes in Australia had a TV. So this really reflects the significance of this particular aspect of popular culture right from its beginning. So we had in this time period 15-year-olds who were watching 9 to 12 hours of TV a week. Now this is more than most of the other recreational activities that they would be doing, such as sport. So again, this shows how dominant television was. During the time, most of the programs were from America. We did have Australian produced shows, but the US programs really drew the viewers in, and these were things like I Love Lucy, pictured here, which is a comedy show. So then we come to the 60s, and TV still was gaining prominence. So here we had 9 out of 10 families actually owning a TV and watching television shows. The US still really dominated our television market, and a survey in 1963 actually showed that 97% of what was on our screens was from America. In saying this though, just like we've seen in the 60s with film, society really wanted to start seeing more of themselves. So we wanted to see more Australian content and actual reflections of our lives on the screen. So they demanded more Australian content. In the 60s, these are a few of the Australian shows. So we had Mr. Squiggle here, which was for children, very popular children's show. We had Bandstand, which was promoted to teenagers, showing them, music performances. And then probably one of the most famous TV shows to come out of the 60s is Skippy the Bush Kangaroo. And what's really interesting about Skippy the Bush Kangaroo was that it was actually made in colour, so filmed in colour, before Australia actually had colour TV. So what this actually means is that Skippy was generally created for a global market, and it was one of the ones that became really popular overseas. So then we're moving into the 70s, where colour TV actually became available in Australia. And TV itself began to expand to more remote and rural areas of Australia, whereas before it was mainly in urban and suburban areas. The federal government at the time imposed a certain quota where 50% of the content shown between the hours of 4 and 10 p.m. every day had to be Australian. So this reflected what society was demanding at the time. So this really had the dominance of overseas content, which we were seeing in the previous eras, was really being challenged in Australia. And we had programs that broke social barriers, and they used humour to comment on political and social issues. So we have the Paul Hogan show here. So this show was one of the shows that really commented on Australian issues. And Paul Hogan is really famous for promoting the image of the ochre and larrikinism. And this was probably the first show where being considered an ochre invited the audience to laugh with him, not at him as a nasty stereotype or representation of Australia. Hey Hey It's Saturday is probably one of the most iconic TV shows from this era, and it ran well into the 90s as well. And then we had Countdown. Molly Meldrum run that, and that was really important because it brought music and performances most of which were Australian bands to teenagers right across the country. The 80s was a really interesting era for TV. So we actually had SBS, the channel that we know now. That's when it was established, and it started showing more content from overseas, so foreign films, foreign TV shows in foreign languages. And all of these TV shows just reflected that Australia's society was changing and it was becoming more multicultural in its population. So that was a really interesting development. We then had mini-series became really popular. So mini-series were stories about Australians, starring Australians, made in Australia, specifically designed for an Australian audience. And the storylines occurred over a defined number of episodes. So it was usually around 10 episodes or so that these mini-series would take place. Two really popular examples. We had Women of the Sun, which really brought Indigenous issues, especially women's Indigenous issues, to the forefront and allowed Australia to start talking about that. And then we had, here's a very young Nicole Kidman in Bangkok Hilton, which is all about a drug trade from Asia and smuggling drugs back to Australia. So it's looking at these political and social issues within Australia. Many of the many of the miniseries were based on really popular Australian novels as well. So then we also had soapies or soap operas that became really popular in this time period, where it was an ongoing dramatic series storyline that extends across lots of different episodes. Generally, each episode ends with a cliffhanger, which is designed to really draw audiences back in. The most famous ones in Australia are Neighbours and Home and Away, which both started in the 80s, and together from their inception till now, they've created 12,000 episodes between them, and they play every single day of the week, and audiences just keep coming back to watch these shows. The soapies generally are designed to reflect Australian life. So Neighbours is a suburban Australian life, whereas Home and Away is more of a beachside town. And they both have launched the careers of many of our Australian stars, like Kylie Minogue. So they got their beginnings on soap operas. We then moved to the 90s, and the 90s was a really interesting era because this is when Foxtel and Austar arrived, so the idea of subscription TV channels. So you could pay to access TV from all over the world. US sitcoms and drama series had massive followings in this era, so we had shows like Friends, Baywatch, The X-Files. They were huge in Australia in the 90s. But Australian-made shows were still being produced. So we actually had our very first reality television show in Australia during this period, and that was called Sylvania Waters, and it followed a family around to see their daily interactions. And we also started to get lifestyle shows emerging. So shows like Better Homes and Gardens appeared on our screens and had massive followers. So then we're moving over 2000 and beyond. So we're talking about really recently. So on our screens at the moment, US television shows still have a really strong impact on our popular culture in Australia. You only have to look at The Big Bang Theory, this picture up the top here, to see, and a TV guide, to see how much we are influenced by America. The Big Bang Theory is pretty much on every single night, and it's on for an hour to an hour and a half every night. But I guess one of the biggest displays that we can show of American influence over Australian popular culture is when Oprah came to Australia and filmed 2 television shows, and there was this mass hysteria surrounding it. Everyone wanted to see her, everyone wanted a piece of her, everyone wanted to be on the show, and that just showed how massive this one program and this one presenter is in Australia. So Australia is still producing and still has been producing shows that have received really good ratings and are enjoyed by lots of people. So we have Kath and Kim and Underbelly Razor, so that's a mini-series about Australia's underground crimes. So both of these have really strong ratings and have done well in Australia and overseas, particularly Underbelly Razor. And then one of the most interesting developments in recent times is that of reality television. So in 2001, Big Brother aired for the first time, and that was when it really started to draw Australians into what are other people doing. And Big Brother was one of those ones that really started to make us question, where does entertainment sort of end and where are we pushing the boundaries for what we're watching? But from Big Brother and from reality TV, we have like subgenres. So things like The Block, which is a home improvement reality TV show. We've got MasterChef, which is looking for cooking talent. And we've got things like The Voice, which is looking for singing talent. So, and there's also things like The Bachelor, which is really popular at the moment as a dating show. So you can see how from the beginning of when television arrived, right up until now, there has been massive changes from what we see on our screens, and it's influenced by, you know, overseas and also what's going on within Australia. We can still see evidence of certain genres on our screens. Home and Away and Neighbours are still playing, and that they started in the 80s. So there's a real sense of change and continuity. And I also want you to have a think about, for when we come to class, historical significance of these television shows and television as an aspect of popular culture. Okay, so that's about it. We're going to wrap up there. Don't forget to fill in the Google form, and I will see you in class. Bye!